Hey, make sure you hit that like and subscribe on our journey to 100,000 subscribers.
This is the worst.
Welcome into the worst fantasy show. I'm your host with the least, Jack Lucene, and that is right. We are officially on a journey to 100,000 YouTube subscribers. I looked it up. That's how much you need to quit a job. So, with that said, make sure you hammer that like and subscribe, and welcome in our special guest today. We're putting the dynamic duo back together.
Yeet, drop that, yeet, skirt that, yeet, pop that, yeet, hey.
Yeet. Yeet.
Ooh, welcome
Yeet.
to the show. Thank you for coming in to cheer me up today.
Yes, sir. We need a little bit of positivity up in here. It's been a rough week. It's been a rough week over here too. Let me tell you, man. My betting has been god awful. We need to turn things around. I keep trying to get back on the right track. It's not working, but I feel like week four. Maybe I'm going insane and keep doing the same thing over and over again, but week 4 is the week.
I'm
Baby.
on that gambler's edge where it feels like every week I'm right there, but there's like one thing that fucks up my lineup, and I'm just like, it's right there.
Yeah, Rashid Shaheed was there for me last week. Zay Flowers, he didn't do great for me. Brock Bowers fell short, very close. So, man, it's been tough, but we're slowly getting a better and clearer picture, and we're gonna make some money this season. I promise.
All right, before we get into everything, I know you're all over the place during the season. Tell us a little bit where we find your work.
Well, you can find me. I'm doing a weekly article. I'm releasing my favorite bets for the week. If you didn't check it out the last few weeks, you're doing yourself a little bit of a service. But like I said, we're turning things around. And so every week, most likely on Saturday mornings before things kick off on Sunday, you can go ahead, take a look at the article over at optimistfantasy.com. And we normally put in at least 8 bets throughout the weekend on what are some things that I'm leaning towards. There's even some parlay options, even some just like money line things that I'm leaning towards, like Packers. Packers was one of my winning bets last week or this current week previously, whatever you want to put it. But Wan'Dale Robinson, he cashed for me as well. So if you read these articles and you just do them individually and you don't parlay them, be a crazy man like me, hey, maybe you can win some money. I'm not sure. But that's it. And then you guys can check me out over at Club Fantasy on Tuesday nights for Trade Block. We've got a great team over there. We got Dustin and Joel, and we break down dynasty trades, dynasty value for players, and we like to compare players around their current ADPs and see who's falling, who's rising, where would you like them, and where everyone's at. So if you got any trades or you got any questions, make sure you guys head over to Club Fantasy on Tuesday nights. Drop a question.
All right, I'm in a bit of a mood, so before we get into the real guys that disappointed us, let's actually go into more of a positive skew. Again, you've on the show here to cheer me up. We're going to start with the hearts, my guy. So starting with quarterbacks.
Yeah,
Lamar Jackson, Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, Andy motherfucking Dalton. Oh, that was my best call of the week. I had Dalton, literally played him in multiple leagues, including Scott Fishbowl. They were all super flex, but just the fact that I played Andy Dalton and he made this list, little pat on the back for myself there. Sam Darnold, continuing to prove me wrong. Malik Willis, showing that situations and teams really do matter.
I'm going to sound like Braun right now, but I was this close to tweeting before the Packers game, like, watch out for the Malik Willis revenge game. And then I saw the sit down interview that he had where he was like, this isn't that. They drafted me to give me opportunity. It's all love. And I'm like, okay, maybe he's not going to ball out. Maybe he's just going to have an average day. No, he had a great day. revenge game. He showed the Titans, why did you go with Will Levis over me? So good for him. Great day.
Trust me, if Malik Willis was there in Will Levis's place, he would be making just as stupid of mistakes. I really do believe that the Packers situation is very, very different. Packers just can't help but develop quarterbacks. It's in their blood.
They have a great team. It's a lot of like what the Packers are and their identity this season. And I drafted a lot of Packers defense in a lot of leagues that still do defenses and kickers. So the Packers defense this year, they're loaded with stars. I'm a huge Jair Alexander fan. I feel like he's completely underrated. I think he's top 3. Most people would say he's confidently top like 5 or so. It just depends on where you view things. I think the only 2 I'd probably put above him is Surtain and Jalen Johnson. So I think he's 3 right there. And Sauce is probably 4. I still have Jair a little bit higher. It could be controversial, but I still do. But this is a loaded defense. So I understand why Malik Willis had a great day. I mean, you could bank on a great team. Even Christian Watson showed up. Like, I thought that we were going to see everyone but Christian Watson. I already gave up on that by week 2. So good to see him turn things around. It kind of proves my point about Jaden Reed. Like, any of these guys can go off. We saw Wicks last week. We saw Watson this week. So give it up for Malik Willis, everybody, on the worst fantasy football show. We've probably talked about him many times on this show.
Man, for you IDP heads out there, I do fuck with some IDP. Deeper leagues, Lucas Van Ness, former first-round pick, been stepping it up on the DN for the Packers defense. So he'd be a hot pickup in IDP.
Hawkeye.
Yeah. But to round out the quarterback, speaking of Packers, former Packer Aaron Rodgers, now with the Jets, had a good Thursday. Justin Fields, hilariously enough, I have so much of him in best ball. It's gross, but it's because I saw him as a lottery ticket because of the rushing upside. And here he is, top 10. Patrick Mahomes and Caleb Williams doing it a lot in garbage time, rounding it out. And then shout out Bo Nix, Daniel Jones, Kyler Murray, and Jared Goff were serviceable. So anything you really want to talk about in the quarterbacks there before we move on?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing I want to point out is I want to know where you stand. I don't know if we've talked about this previously, so if we have, remind me. But where do you stand on Aaron Rodgers' likelihood of winning MVP this season?
Oh, he's not getting MVP. He's going to get comeback player of the year if he survives the year. I feel like he would really have to turn it on stats wise to get MVP. I feel like Saquon Barkley for a non-quarterback is already making an early run for the rare, again, non-quarterback MVP, just carrying that load for the Eagles. But like there's other quarterbacks. I mean, Brock Purdy just even though he lost, like he looked great in that game without any of his offensive weapons. If they can turn their season around and get a winning, like again, there's like Lamar is going to be a candidate always. And I don't know.
Well, like hear me out, okay? I mean, the last few years, the person that's been the number 1 seed in the AFC has walked away with the MVP. So, what's the pathway for the Jets to be the number 1 seed? I mean, you look at the rest of their division right now. Miami without Tua is a graveyard right there. That's a bad way to put it. I don't want to put it that way. That sounds disgusting.
No,
you understand what I mean? Is that they're not looked at like they're a ghost of what we thought they would be. That's a better way to put it. I hope Tua comes back healthy and faster than ever. So I hope that doesn't come off inappropriate. But you're seeing like the collapse of the rest of the teams, like the Dolphins, the Patriots they got whooped by the Jets on Thursday Night Football. So I think that there's a clear pathway. If they can get over the Bills, and I don't know how sustainable the Bills with what they're doing is going to be throughout the season. So you got the Chiefs right now who's undefeated. You got the Steelers right now who are undefeated. I mean, I still think that the Bengals and the Ravens will turn things around and give them more competition throughout the year in that division. So you got the Chiefs. I mean, the Chargers, I don't know if they're going to win the division, but I feel like they're going to be very competitive, and they could they could give the Chiefs a run for their money. So I think that there's enough reason to think that the Chargers are right on the Chiefs' heels, that the Jets are right on the Bills' heels. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Jets ended up with the first seed in the AFC. And if Aaron Rodgers can turn that team all the way to the first seed in the AFC, then you almost like have to give him MVP regardless of the stats. I mean, even like Tom Brady, when like last time that Aaron won MVP, Tom's stats were a little bit better, but you also had to play in the like all the other factors as well, and why Aaron got that MVP. He deserved it. And so I could see him doing it, and I wouldn't really discredit it. The odds are at plus 1,600 right now, I believe. I believe that they still are. I mean, I checked it a few days ago, and that's what I cashed it at before the season as well. So I wouldn't disregard that. We've seen Aaron Rodgers win MVPs with even less talent than what the Jets have currently. So Breece Hall could be the Aaron Jones, and Garrett Wilson could be the Devontae Adams.
I'm looking for arguments against it, and I will admit that I'm finding fewer than I anticipated. So I will say that I think I'm starting to agree with it a little bit more. I do still view like I think Kyler Murray, if they can get it together, and like again, you talk about like if they win the division and ultimately the conference, I'm just looking at some candidates that I think could surpass. Like Sam Darnold, hilariously, was one that came to mind, and that's when I started being like, Aaron Rodgers is a legitimate argument if Sam Darnold is.
I mean, I was like the biggest Aaron Rodgers critic. So the fact that I am the one coming out of the woodwork and saying like, hey guys, don't forget about Aaron Rodgers. Like, he is still that guy. Like, yes, because he didn't show it because he was injured last year, it doesn't mean that he's like gonna just like wither away and not be good. And I felt like a lot of times like they were contradicting themselves, most of the people that were saying, well, Garrett Wilson can be a top 10 wide receiver and Breece Hall can be the RB1. And it's like, okay, well, who is conducting the offense? It's Aaron Rodgers' offense. So he is going to be the reason why that this team flourishes, and they easily could. So if we got a Vikings fan in here, I just tweeted about the Jets actually playing the Vikings in the Super Bowl this year and the likelihood of that.
Sam Darnold versus Aaron Rodgers Super Bowl. We just said they're both MVP candidates. But I think for me, when I'm looking at actual arguments against, like if the Cowboys turn it around, if the Ravens end up being the Ravens, like Dak and Lamar are perennial MVP candidates. So it would depend on their records, where they end up versus the Jets, and then also their stats as compared to Aaron Rodgers directly. So I'm just looking for arguments against what you're saying. I'm not saying that is more or even less likely. I'm just throwing out some outliers. Like outliers would be like Darnold if he kept it up all year, Saquon as a non-quarterback if he actually just carries that team all year and cracks 2,000 all-purpose and like 20 touchdowns. And like Jalen Hurts regresses a little bit. I think that's another one, maybe. I think Aaron Rodgers is totally viable based on what I'm saying is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, he's looked good. I mean, here's my argument with the Vikings fan in the chat. I want to know what they're actually thinking as well. And so when you look at the history, the last time Patrick Mahomes didn't go to the Super Bowl, and based off of how we've seen them, you're seeing an obvious regression out of this team. They're not as explosive and electric as we anticipated for sure. And so when you're looking at it, the likelihood of this being the year that the Chiefs don't make it to the Super Bowl, I'm not sure. I'm not going to bet against it. But if there was an argument for it, you look at what was the last time, the Rams versus the Bengals, and you look at where both teams are. Aaron Rodgers could be the Matthew Stafford for this Jets team, like Matthew Stafford was for the Rams. And even like we're thinking about, I'm sorry, but the name is spacing right now. Who's the defensive player for Hassan Reddick? Hassan Reddick hasn't even came. Hassan Reddick could be that missing piece to this Jets defense halfway through the season, like Von Miller was for that Rams team. So this couldn't even be the best of the Jets that we see. Or if they end up trading him, what the pieces back that they can get for trading Hassan Reddick, or whether they pay him, I'm not sure. So that could be like that mid-season acquisition that they do to put them over the top, or even like the Vikings being like the Bengals in this scenario. Bengals never won a Super Bowl. Vikings never won a Super Bowl. Bengals that season, they were number 1 seed for a few weeks starting out the year. So like the Vikings might be hot. They might cool down a little bit once, Packers get fully healthy. Lions get things rolling again with Monron, like they're all that offense once Sam Laporta is fully healthy. But I mean, that's kind of like what you saw with like the Ravens that year with the Bengals. I believe that the Steelers were actually were pretty decent that season as well. So I could see the similarities adding up, and we could see a Vikings Jets Super Bowl.
All right, let's transition to running backs. We have a question in the chat to help us get there. Rams House 99, thanks for joining. Dynasty, half PPR, Superflex, start 10 people, I guess, 12-teamer. I'm a contender, won the league last year. Should I trade a late first and Javonte for B-Rob and a late third? That still feels like a lot. I know Javonte kind of sucks right now, but unless that B-Rob is Bijan Robinson, I'm not really – I don't know about that, my guy. If I could trade just the first for B-Rob, I do that all day.
It's got to be Bijan. I think it's got to be Bijan.
I feel like if it's Bijan, like that would be like almost – the league's going to get pissed off that you got him for a late first in Javonte. I feel like it has to be Brian Robinson.
Yeah, give us some clarification. We'll be happy to answer that for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna say though, if it's assuming it's Brian Robinson, like obviously if it's Bijan, fucking accept that and hope the league doesn't like have go into a tizzy over it. But if it's Brian Robinson, I would actually be like, look, I can give you my second and Javonte or just the first. Like pick one of those, and fuck the late third. Like that's kind of how I would frame it because I feel like you're giving up too much. Take it like moving the first all the way back to a third and then only upgrading from Javonte to B-Rob. I like B-Rob a lot, but not that much.
Yeah, I respect you in the sense that I know I'm not going to undermine you and talk about Bijan's upside. Everyone knows what his upside is. So let's look at what oh man, I'm spacing right now. Brian Robinson, what Brian Robinson's possible future is looking like. I mean, I think that he could have a future very similar to David Montgomery. You see, we've seen what Austin Eckler can do this season, and I mean he's outperformed expectations in my eyes. I thought that he would have had a little bit less explosivity than he had, but also he was injured last season, so you should have given him a little bit of a boost, or a handicap or whatever the term for it is. So I think that you could see that next year they're going to want to replace Austin Eckler long-term with someone in this draft class. I mean, there's going to be plenty of good running backs in this next draft class. And so I could see the Commanders going after a running back in second, third round and really kind of building that young core together. But still, like whatever running back that they draft, people are going to talk themselves into it and be like, oh, this is the running back of the future. He's only 22, only 21, whatever. But it's like Brian Robinson is so good. I think he's going to be very similar to David Montgomery that like no matter how good the one guy is that they draft, Brian Robinson is going to be chipping away because like once he's on the field, he earns those opportunities to keep seeing the field. And like I love players like that. I love getting players like that because like when big names don't show out, guys like Brian Robinson come through more than you expect.
For sure. And Hunter 18, I do see if there's anyone we're spending the number one waiver on. We will answer that question when we get to the waiver section, so stick around. That's going to be after. We're doing hearts right now. We're going to do the farts after, which is, again, studs and duds if you're not familiar. And then we'll be hitting our waivers after that. So running backs. Saquon Barkley continues to dominate. King Henry. I had a couple rosters where I had both of those guys. They literally saved me. That was huge. Kyron Williams, Jonathan Taylor, Chuba Hubbard, Aaron Jones, Zach Charbonnet, David Montgomery, Devin Singletary, Jahmyr Gibbs, Emmanuel Wilson popping up here, talking about number one waiver priority. He might be someone to consider. Breece Hall, Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson, Najee Harris, all doing it through volume. And Bucky Irving also popping up here again. possible contention for that number one waiver priority. Shout out Joe Ortiz in the comments. I'm glad you're here, my guy, because I got to mention you later when we get to the quarterback farts. I kind of fucked you up by telling you to start CJ Stroud. We'll see if Jaden Daniels outperforms that tonight, because I think that's who I was deciding between, if I remember. But, yeah, Stroud ended up on the dud side of this list. We'll get to that a little bit later. But, hey, those running backs, a lot of those big-time running backs are hitting these days. So who, anyone you really want to talk about in the running back spot there?
I mean, we talked about Saquon a little bit. I think that's my offensive player of the year candidate. I got Aaron winning MVP. I got Saquon winning offensive player of the year. That's a recent pick. That's not something that I have receipts on. So this is a new one for me. I think that he could do it. I think that he has the sustainability to do it. And if he can do it long throughout the year, we're seeing that once these wide receivers start falling off with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith now hurt as well, it's going to be a lot of Saquon and Dallas Goedert. And I'm not the biggest Dallas Goedert fan, but I think that he's going to be heavily involved this next few weeks until this team gets 100%. So Saquon could put up a great October, and so I think that he's gonna make a heavy race or a heavy case for offensive player of the year. And so who are some of the other names on the list?
So again, I'm just looking at this list, and usually you get your zero running back truthers popping up out of the woodwork, being like, look at all these names. But there really weren't that many. It's like Chuba Hubbard, Zach Charbonnet. I don't think anyone started Emmanuel Wilson. And then you look at the rest of these names. These were all single-digit round draft picks, and you could have stocked up on them. I literally have a league where I would have lost if not for my two running backs being Saquon and King Henry, because the rest of my team was dog shit. But luckily, the other team wasn't that great either. And those two running backs carried me to a win this week where I desperately needed one. So Saquon, King Henry, Kyron, JT, that's your top four. And then Chuba had a great game now that Andy Dalton is under center. And then you had Zach Charbonnet had 2 touchdowns. And then, again, back to the guys that we drafted. David Montgomery, Devin Singletary, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, Alvin Kamara, Bijan Robinson, Najee Harris.
Yeah, the name that stood out the most was Chuba. And I was giving Joel a hard time before the game because he was hating on Chuba. And
that's another one.
And I was like, don't be hating. I was like, don't be hating. It's a terrible look on you. And
he was
sure enough,
a lot too. So actually talking about going back to Hunter's question, and we're getting ahead of ourselves, but number one waiver priority, if he was dropped in your league, Chuba Hubbard, 100%.
And I feel like even if people don't want to talk themselves into Chuba, it's almost contradicting, because there's a lot of people in this space that I heavily respect their opinion, and all of them, or at least most of them, in my opinion, would be speaking the truth about Jonathan Brooks being the league winner. And once he comes back, you're seeing it with what Chuba can do. I love with what Jonathan Brooks can do now, seeing what Chuba can do. So in the meantime, Chuba's going to be someone that he should definitely be in contention of being starting.
Jonathan Brooks would have dust in the fucking wind if Bryce Young was somehow still starting by then, though. Right. Like, we need to now rely on Daddy Dalton here, because I said this was going to happen too. Like, as soon as Dalton came in, he's been with the team for a minute. He's a savvy veteran, and he's going to be able to manipulate the short passing game with Thielen and Deontay Johnson. Like, and just lean on the running game. Otherwise, like, this was very much like Dave Canales' system works 100% with an Andy Dalton, not with a Bryce Young.
How crazy is it to think that they actually
gets to me?
How crazy is it to think that they trade Bryce Young for like Matthew Stafford? Like, not straight up, obviously, with like draft picks.
That's not going to happen, because the Rams are not. This is where, again, so two overarching theories are coming to play in the running back section here. My number one thing this year was prioritizing running backs in places where I was staring down the barrel of, like, you know, the second wide receiver on his own team. Like, you know, I was picking Saquon Barkley over Jalen Waddle, for example, because they were actually kind of going in similar ranges. But like real life football, I think sometimes like there's just no way that McVay and the Rams are going to give up Matthew Stafford right now. Like whether other people outside of the organization think that they're not in contention, I can tell you, watch the reaction and the press conference or sorry, like the team reaction after they won that game against the 49ers. Like they don't believe that they're like done for the season or anything like that at all. Like they are still in their minds very much competing. So they're not going to just trade Stafford unless it was like later in the season and they just haven't won any games and like things are just going completely off the rails. Then you could make the case, but like they literally just beat the Niners now. So again, that's where I feel like, and the last place that he's going to get traded, honestly, they're not going to do. That's another thing where it's like, I don't think the Rams would do Stafford dirty to trade him to the Panthers. Like there's other options if they want to trade him and better ones, frankly. Like they could trade him to the Packers, quite honestly.
I personally, I wouldn't want to play there, but Carolina's a beautiful place. So maybe the staff move the family out to Carolina.
Showing up in Carolina this late in the season, trying to pick up that offense and compete with Andy Dalton, who's already got it. Like Matt Stafford is essentially the same quarterback as Andy Dalton at this stage of their careers.
Side comment: how long do you think Matthew Stafford is in LA?
I mean, definitely for the rest of this year, and then we'll see for next year.
Really?
If they decide to retool. Trust me, these NFL teams are a lot more stubborn than people think, and they're like a lot more recidivist to change, especially like certain quarterbacks like a Matthew Stafford that very much become part of the fabric of your team culture. Like those kind of guys are just harder to replace overall. Unless they have a solid plan at quarterback, I just don't envision them like moving off of Stafford that easily.
I heard they were going after JJ McCarthy last year. So
yeah, and if they were able to bring in McCarthy, like I totally expect them to explore drafting a young quarterback that can redshirt behind Stafford for a year. But again, that's what I mean by having a viable plan to move off of Stafford. I don't envision them just moving him without any kind of actual backup plan and then expecting to just go into free agency or start a rookie next year. Like that's not really the Rams' MO. And when I mean the Rams, I mean Sean McVay and the higher ups like the GM.
Yeah, no, there's no real argument there.
My guy Ortiz, I started Stroud. I mean, what you're going to do early in the season. He did have a trade question. Olave and Zamir White for Pollard and Pickens. I would do that all day. If I could get Pollard and Pickens right now off. Pickens, honestly, like he had the bad game last week, but it was like one was pulled back on a penalty. He made this absolutely fucking insane catch, and it was on the kid there in Denver, the really good one. What's his name? I'm blanking on the kid's name there. The cornerback, the perennial one.
Patrick Surtain?
Yeah, Pickens made the catch on Surtain. And it was like a 50-yard bomb, like an absolutely fucking bonkers catch.
Man, this is tough.
And he mossed him, straight up mossed him. And I know Will Levis looks ridiculous, but like the only positive part of the Titans offense with any consistency throughout the beginning of the season has been Tony Pollard. Trust me, I've had him. He's had 2 great weeks, and then he had this one bad week. And I have him later in the list as a don't worry because he only had 9 touches. Like, yeah, he's going to have a bad week if he only has 9 touches, guys. It happens. So I don't expect that to happen most weeks. And Tyjae snap percentage Spears isn't good enough to get Pollard off the field. He didn't do any better. Trust me, he had less fantasy points than Pollard.
Yeah, I think I would do Pollard and Pickens, but it's a recency bias because I would have dug my feet in and you asked me to start the year.
Fine for the rest of the season. I'm looking at Zamir White as a dead asset here. That's where I'm looking at. Like I am dumping an absolute brick on this roster. Zamir White, get out of my life. Like, shout out to my guy Disco. He's doubling down. When I'm watching Alexander Madison vulture your touches this much early in the season, there is just no fucking way. What's up, Albert, in the chat?
What's up, Albert?
let's move on to wide receiver here. We got to jump through the heart so we can get to trashing some of these guys. Your number one wide receiver on the week, just like everybody predicted, Jawan Jennings. Come on down. You to not get paid on The Price is Right. Malik,
he got paid.
Neighbors, putting himself in the top 5 wide receiver dynasty discussion already. Rashee Rice is nipping on his tails too. Amari Cooper finally showed up with all them targets. DK Metcalf continues to have one amazing broken coverage per day. Deontay Johnson brought back to life thanks to Andy Dalton. Calvin Austin, don't chase that. Roma Dunes, Trey Tucker, Jacoby Myers, chase that if Devontae Adams gets traded. He's a guy I'm keeping my eye on, who I'm hoping gets traded. I don't know how stubborn the Raiders organization is right now with Antonio Pierce talking about business decisions.
Apparently that wasn't Devontae. Apparently that was about the defense.
Yeah? Okay. I mean, the defense looked like they were trying, and they, literally Max Crosby, he made a couple plays late, but they game planned the whole thing around. We're going to chip him and double him and fuck with him on every single play. We're going to run at him on purpose to wear him out. Body punches in a fight. They literally did everything they could to take out Max Crosby offensively. So if he's trying to say that about Crosby, that sounds like some bullshit. But I guess we'll see how they respond.
Maybe he's gonna fire him up.
Yeah. But yeah, Chris Olave made the list. Justin Jefferson continues to amaze with Sam Darnold. Amon-Ra St. Brown. DeAndre Hopkins. It was his turn this week. Drake London kind of getting it going. Stephon Diggs. Hey, everyone was trashing me for saying Stephon Diggs could still get it done in Houston. He had 10 targets and 9 receptions. He is definitely the pecking order there right now is Nico, Stephon, and Tank Dell is picking up the slack, which I think sucks for the Tank Dellians out there. But then MHJ and Godwin also round out this list. So any spicy takes about the wide receivers?
Nothing really. That's where this week is just really gross. I can't wait for next week. That's my best take about this week's Frederick class. You
think that's gross? Let's get into the tight ends. This is where it gets fun. Oh my fuck. Okay.
No.
The tight ends this week, my guy. Oh my God. Did you draft an elite tight end this year?
Go fuck yourself.
Thanks, Trey.
All right, let me read off this top 10. Jesus fuck. Dallas Goedert. Yo, shout out to Dallas Goedert. I have trashed the fuck out of Dallas Goedert for most of his career. This was the best fantasy day he's ever had, by the way. Hit career highs for receptions and yards. Number 1 on the day. Next up, Cole Kmet. And honestly, I feel really good.
I wrote about that.
So my buddy messaged me, and he was like, "I have Cole Kmet. Should I start Mike Gesicki? What about Brenton Strange?" He's asking for all these auxiliary. I was like, dude, just start Kmet. Keenan Allen's out. Just if you're gonna start all these fucking random bench dudes, just start Kmet and hope for the best. Wow, glad I said that. And then Jake Ferguson came back from the dead. I thought this guy was gonna miss a couple weeks. He's your number 3 tight end on the week. Tyler Conklin and Noah Fant round out your top 5. And by the way, Noah Fant had all of 9 points. So to give you guys the next 5 on this list, Nick Vannett, Kyle Pitts. I had a whole segment last year on who scored more than Kyle Pitts this week, and he's been doing actually okay, only because all of the tight ends suck this year. But he had 2 for 59. He had that one big 50-yard catch was enough to get him in the top 10. And then you had Johnny Munt, Josh Weil, and shout out Brock Bowers. Guess what? Brock Bowers was still top 10 with 3 for 41 against the Panthers.
Brock Bowers. Oh, man. I mean, when I saw the Nick Vannett touchdown, I was like, there's a lot of Chig and Conquo fans that are pissed right now. I had Trey McBride in a lot of leagues this year, so he's one of the people that's somewhat carrying the torch right now. But It's been rough. Who are some of the early ones that you were saying? Because there was one on the tip of my tongue.
Oh my god.
It was like early, like one of the first four.
Tyler Conklin.
No.
Jake Ferguson, Cole Kmet, Dallas Goddard, Noah Fant, Noah Fantastic, Nick Vanette, Kyle Pitts, Johnny.
Oh,
Bunch,
Jake Ferguson. It was Jake Ferguson. I believe it was Godfather Perry or Godfather Barry, Matthew Barry, that was saying that if Jake Ferguson's available, he should be a must start this week. And I'm glad I did, because I started Jake Ferguson in a lot of leagues this year. I feel like it's going to get better, but how much better is better?
That.
How much better is better? Like,
you keep saying that. How long can we hold on?
This is something that, like, if you really like went after Brock Bowers this year, like, it's such a clear advantage. Like it basically, like, we were so lucky last year. We jumped the gun, and now it's already gone. Like, now we only have one clear tight end one, and everyone else is like progressing swiftly, I guess you could say.
So in Scott Fishbowl, ironically enough, I grabbed a Brock Bowers. I kind of waited on tight end, and I thought I waited too long, and I got Bowers. I was like, fuck, I've got a rookie tight end, and he's got Michael Mayer there. Like, that's potentially dangerous for me.
Oh,
Turns
Cole
out,
Kmet.
oh, no, it wasn't. Now I've got...
I was gonna rant about Cole Kmet. Is that's the one that I knew, and I disregarded my first opinion, and I flip-flopped on it because I felt like Cole Kmet was going to be a great steal this year, and that he was going to be heavily utilized with Shane Waldron. And then after week 1, I panicked because Gerald Everett outsnapped him and out-targeted him. And so I'm like, okay, I guess it's Gerald Everett. You know, I could be wrong, but man, this is the week that Cole Kmet was heavily utilized. I mean, Shane Waldron, I wrote about it with Club Fantasy during the Bears segment. That you saw like how much Shane Waldron used 13 personnel when he was with Seattle, and that's one of the reasons why JSN like wasn't fully unleashed last season, was because like he was like heavily utilizing the tight ends. So I'm not surprised that Cole Kmet is outproducing. I want to see it like back-to-back weeks before I can say like, oh yeah, like you should definitely be starting Cole Kmet. But this is just like such a bad year for tight ends. Like, go ask someone else that's smarter about tight ends this year. Go ask Coop. That's the guru.
All right, we got a trade question before we move on here. Yo, I need 26 points in full PPR. Do you start Higgins or Moss? I'm assuming that's Zach Moss, not Randy Moss. The only way you're getting 26 points in PPR is if it is Randy Moss. I would start T. Higgins. I don't think it's happening, but it's the only path I see here.
I think I would take Moss.
Do you think Moss gets the closer to 26 than Higgins?
I think 26. PPR? I think tonight we're going to see Chase get 3 touchdowns. I really do. I think that it's going to be one of those games.
My hope would be that it was T. Higgins that had the 3 touchdown games, because that's, again, when I'm looking at this, I'm like, there's no path in my mind that Moss is the one that gets the 3 touchdown game. That would suck for a lot of DFS and a lot of things, but
like Moss could get 2 and then Chase get 1, like or Chase Brown get 1. But like I really think tonight's going to be the night that that Jamar Chase gets 3 touchdowns.
I have a lot. I will say on like my DFS stuff, I have a lot of Jamar Chase tonight, but I backed it up by saying, I will say, I also put in a lot of T. Higgins, just because, again, I'm just looking at like which guy potentially has the capability of having an explosive game and hitting 26 points in PPR. I think I personally would go with Higgins and hope for the best.
I've been burnt so many times saying that, oh yeah, he's ready to go, and then he's only out there for like a few. You know?
I mean, that's
so
totally
I'm really worried about that. I know Moss is going to see the field, so I think that's probably the guy.
Yeah. We're split, so it doesn't really help your case, but I'm saying Higgins. Hoove is saying Zach Moss. So just pick which one of us you like better and go with that.
Go with Jack, I promise.
All right. Just quickly, defense, by the way, we always shout out the defense. Packers, Jets, Seahawks, Broncos, Vikings. Giants, Colts, Steelers. Those are your best streaming defenses of the week. All right, let's get into the main event here. Let's trash on some shit. It's time to get into the farts.
Come on, don't bullshit me. Bullshit. 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 You said it's all bullshit.
Deshaun Voldemort motherfucking Massage Man Watson can't score more than 10 fantasy points. No, he actually had kind of an okay day, but it still wasn't great. Stroud kind of hurt you. Hurts, meh. Carr, meh. They kind of saved themselves a little bit, but it was not really what you're expecting. And I think quarterback scoring has just kind of been down across the board, because even the Hearts, it's not like these guys are, dropping 40, 50-point games right now. And then the under 10 club, these are the guys that really hurt you this week. Anthony Richardson, as good as he is athletically, one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And then Justin Herbert got hurt. So his status now very questionable going forward. We might have to see some combination of Easton Stick and was it Tim Boyle? No, that's the Dolphins. Fuck. Some other jabroni. And then Baker Mayfield had a bad game against Denver. That was a shocking one. The Denver game, like, to me, those were like, it's like they just decided to swap personalities for the day. Like the Broncos played like the Buccaneers and the Buccaneers played like the Broncos. So that was fucking weird.
You kind of knew that Patrick Surtain was going to lock down Mike Evans. I really wanted to take Mike Evans just because you saw that, like he's been doing great this season. But when I saw the matchup, I'm like, I'm going to avoid this one. I'm even going to avoid Baker, even though I bet on Baker last week as well, and that would have cashed if I individually bet it. So Anthony Richardson is someone to move on to. Another person that you listed is I'm not ready, because as someone that was heavily in on Anthony Richardson as a rookie, and I thought that he would be the QB1 of that draft class. I'm not ready to say that he's bad, but I'm not ready to admit that he's good. And that's really worrisome, because he had such amazing promise, and we're seeing things that I don't understand how Shane Steichen is behind this offense and how sloppy it looks at times. It can easily be fixed. I mean, like, I'm going to hope for the Josh Allen turnaround, and that it just takes a little bit of time. And then obviously he becomes this larger than life. But even this year I'm held back my expectations. I didn't think it was going to be this. So I am a little bit worried in that sense. Like, I thought that he wasn't going to be as run heavy. I thought that they were going to be heavily lenient on Jonathan Taylor, but it's not that. It's the offense that I thought I was going to see, but just not as flashy, and that is sending off some alarms in my head.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that he can never get better. That's not what I'm saying here. But when I'm looking at how he is playing right now, like, he is just as bad as Bryce Young. The only difference is he is just 10 million times, like, I'm being hyperbolic, but he's just way more athletic, clearly. He is a Superman in terms of, like, he's a superhuman athlete. But dude can't read the field, has no fucking touch whatsoever on any of his passes. He's not going through his progressions or his reads. His footwork is sloppy. Like, yes, it's great that he can throw the cannon when he's falling backwards. But the fact that he is tripping and falling backwards in the first place is part of the fucking problem. It's, again, we just saw this. People are like, oh my God, the Carolina Panthers look so much better with Andy Dalton. Yeah, because Andy Dalton is an actual quarterback. That's what a quarterback is supposed to do. It's a lot of processing. It's a lot of the mental stuff. The physical stuff is an accoutrement. It's a nice accessory. But at the end of the day, like, the reason that Tom Brady and Drew Brees and Peyton Manning were some of the most successful quarterbacks in the entire history of the NFL was completely 100% above their chin. Had nothing to do with their athletics. It was the way that they were able to read and manipulate the game of football. And you do that by, again, being able to go through reads and progressions and read the field in its entirety and look off defenders and do all the nuanced things that the actual greats do. And, you know, Lamar Jackson does some of that stuff some of the time. So I feel like he gets underrated a lot of times. But like you look at like a guy like a Patrick Mahomes, you look at even a Dak Prescott and what some of these other guys are able to do. Anthony Richardson, not even anywhere in that level. And by the way, neither is fucking Josh Allen. Like everyone acts like Josh Allen has made this like magical unicorn leap to being like a fucking Drew Breesian, like accurate, like one of these accurate passes. Like, no, again,
no, he's Brett Favre.
He is exactly. It's Brett Favrean in the sense of, but even, you know, it's Brett Favre meets Cam Newton.
Right.
And like he's throwing 18 interceptions a year for a reason.
But that's a great on its own.
That'll win you sometimes and that'll lose you sometimes. So it's like, again, that's a great comp for what Anthony Richardson could maybe potentially become. But even that is like, there's a lot of limitations. Like, okay, well, so his ceiling is potentially like Cam Newton or Josh Allen, and he's already dealt with injuries. He has a lot less. He doesn't have the same kind of college experience to lean on, so it's going to take him, it feels like, longer to progress and learn. And by the time he's old enough to actually be a complete NFL quarterback, how long does he actually have for his career? So
okay. So like when I was scouting Anthony Richardson last season, and like when I made my analysis on when I thought that he could be the QB1, it was a lot of fantasy football related just because of the athleticism. Did I think that he was going to be like hands down the best quarterback, hands down? Like, no, I mean, like Justin Fields was a great fantasy quarterback and he's not the greatest processor and on the field by any means. And so like, there's the athleticism trait that you were talking about. That's why he was a first round draft pick, was athleticism alone. Like, he's a pure athlete. He was never a first round quarterback. He's a first round athlete. And he is, I mean, remarkable, like with what he can do on the field at Florida. I mean, look at what Florida's been without him and Ricky Purcell. Yeah, Ricky Purcell. So I think that they're going to be fine. But let's say hypothetically, like, they're not good next year as well, and the Colts are like really bad. You think that they're going to pass up on Arch Manning?
No, that's what I'm saying, though. That's what I mean.
Exactly.
Like,
so I would say that I'm a little worried, but also because of that franchise as well. Like, there's a Manning coming up in 2 years, guys. Like, if Anthony Richardson doesn't fix this fast, I could see them getting out.
Because he would still be young enough that he could even be part of the trade that ultimately gets them the younger Manning.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, imagine like the Giants having the first overall pick and the Colts trading Anthony Richardson to get Arch Manning.
I don't think the Giants are stupid enough to do that, because they also want the Manning. They've also
that's a good point.
That's the thing, right?
Point.
They've had a Manning. They know.
Yeah.
They're the only other team that would be like, wait a second, we had the other Manning. We know what's happening here. We got that inside info. All right, we got a question in the chat before we move on here. Tone Bear, I love this question actually. I'm 0-3, kind of in a panic mode. I have CMC, Puka, Brooks on IR. My starters currently are Kyler, Kyron, Mason, Rashi Rice, Olave, Ayuk, Laporta. And then on the bench, we've got Waddle, Lazard, Ford, Alec Pierce, and Tank Dell. What should I do? So the first thing I'm going to say is don't panic. Your team is actually still looking in pretty decent shape for having the injuries that you have. 2, keep playing. Never give up. Never surrender. Let the casuals give up. So many teams start 0-3 and still make it to the fantasy playoffs and then end up winning it all. And a big part of it is because, honestly, if you hold the fort, obviously you're going to have to crush waivers and see what you can do there, or maybe just, pick some of these guys on the right days. Like, I know Laporta got hurt. He's probably going to end up on your IR at this point. So you'll have to shop for a tight end on waivers, which I would not be trying to trade for a tight end in this market right now. So I would kind of just honestly, like, keep trying week in and week out. I know that sounds like a shitty advice, but like, you know, like you still have startable pieces in Lazard and Dell and Ford, especially. I still like Waddle. I know the quarterback situation right now, but it's like if you can manage to get 2 or 3 cheap wins across the next 3 weeks, and kind of if you can just even manage to hold yourself to like a 500 record or a little bit under that, you know, by the time you get to week 8, some of these guys are going to start to come back. Like I think Brooks comes off IR, if I'm not mistaken, in week 6 and would start to be like fully involved by week 8. We could see, I know CMC went on IR, but again, I think he's eligible to come back by week 8, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like, and you have Jordan Mason in the meantime as a direct replacement. Tua also could be back by week 8, depending on his situation, which is I know it's very tenuous because of the concussion thing, but it's like, who knows? Or maybe they end up trading for a quarterback in the interim, which would be amazing. So like, again, I don't know that I'd be like trying to actively go crazy selling anything here. You could maybe see about moving like Olave or Ayuk or something like that. I do see you asking, like, here's a follow-up. Would you trade CMC at all? He's seeing a specialist today about his injury. The only reason I would say no is because you have Jordan Mason. So it's like, if someone else had Jordan Mason, I'd be like, yeah, go trade that person and see if you could get. I feel like I don't know how much you're going to get for CMC alone right now, injured, while also keeping Jordan Mason on the back end. That would be, I feel like, more difficult. What do you think, Hoove?
I would answer this question with, is he seeing a specialist or is a doctor seeing a special player today?
I think it's both. I
wouldn't worry with that team at all. I think that you're set up really well. I think that in the future, it's you'll figure it yourself out with that team. But depending on how deep it is and how deep the playoffs are, I feel like you'll sneak in. Keep it going, keep the faith, and I feel like you'll sneak into the playoffs. And once Puka is back, CMC is back. I'm surprised that you don't have more bench spots with how deep of a roster that is, but you have plenty of pathways. You got Jerome Ford, who I believe in. I think that he's going to do great the rest of the season. I don't know if Chubb's going to come back or even come back like with great fantasy production this season. So I think Jerome Ford's going to be someone that if you were going to trade, maybe you end up trading Jerome Ford once you know that CMC is going to be back and you have that, or maybe you trade Jordan Mason right now to a team that's heavily desperate for a running back because you know that you have Jerome Ford and you know that Jordan Mason is going to be a flash in the pan once CMC is back and fully healthy. So you got plenty of options, man. I mean, you need a Laporta replacement. We talked about tight ends earlier, so you know who's good, and it's Brock Bowers, and then everyone else, it's a crapshoot. So hopefully, once Laporta comes back fully healthy, the offense will figure itself out, and you'll have an easy coast through the playoffs.
All right, let's go through some of these running backs.
You the fuck goofs? Where? Fuck goofs!
Fucking Devon
and shit. God damn it, all my kitties and shit.
Goddamn J.K. Dobbins. Rashad White. No, I'm not doing it all like that. Rashad White, Josh Jacobs, only 14 carries. Samaje Perine, hot pickup off waivers. Didn't do shit. Got out-touched by a fullback. DeAndre Swift, Bears running backs continue to struggle. Tony Pollard, that one I wouldn't worry about. He only had 9 touches. Zamir White-Lal, Javonte Williams, James Conner, that was kind of a weird one. Zeke, Gus Bus, rusted Gus Bus, only got 3 touches. Jalen Warren, this one is, I put him on the list just out of spite, just because I told everyone not to draft Jalen Warren, because he is a nice player for our team. He is useless for your fantasy team and will remain so for the remainder of this season. You're welcome. Trade him, drop him, do what you got to do, get him off your roster. And Deonta Foreman took 14 touches last week for no fucking reason, fucked up the Jerome Ford start, and then was completely irrelevant this week. Browns, what are you going to do?
The Browns are a team that I'm just staying everything away from except for Jerome Ford. I got David Njoku in a league. Currently, Yvette and I in our Pros with Joe's league, we are about to be 2-1, top 5 team in our league. So I'm feeling good, and we got David Njoku coming back pretty soon to help carry on a dominant performance throughout this competition. So I got a few investments with the Browns, but primarily I'm glad that I kind of stood away from that team this year.
Yeah, I mean, I traded infamously. I've talked about it on the show a couple times now. Amari Cooper straight up for James Conner at the beginning of the season in Megala Bowl because I was really heavy on running backs and really light on wide receiver. Like my wide receiver 3 was Brian Thomas Jr. So I was like, fuck, I could use the extra wide receiver. So that trade looked like dog shit for 2 weeks. So this is the first week I've come out on the winning side of it.
I think we're going to see Amari Cooper out on a new team by the end of the year. I really do. I think that it's either going to be the Cowboys again before the playoffs, if they're going to make a stride for it, or the Chargers, and possibly taking targets away from your guy, Ladd McConkey, or maybe even making life a little easier for Ladd McConkey. Who knows?
That's a perfect transition, actually, into the wide receivers.
Knock, knock. Who's there? Fuck off.
So Tank Dell, George Pickens, Brandon Ayuk got all his money to do fuck all. Tyler Lockett and JSN, we just were talking about it. We'll discuss this in a second. Devontae Adams, Ladd McConkey, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Pittman, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle, Xavier Worthy, Zay Flowers, DeMarcus Robinson, Jordan Puka Cuppington. For all you fantasy analysts out there that were like, oh, you got to have Jordan Whittington on your team. You didn't do jack shit.
Who was saying that?
Bro,
I heard one person say that last week. I was like, it's Wednesday night. Or it was
I'm in way
it was
too
Joel.
many echo chambers at this point where I'm like, I start hearing shit like that. I'm like, that's my sign where I'm like, once I see the Jordan Whittington post, I'm like, okay, time to turn off Twitter and take a break. That was the one.
I thought that was actually very insightful. Is that's a name that I heard a lot at the draft was Jordan Whittington, and I'm like, you know what? In a game like this, in a situation like this, where we're banking on DeMarcus Robinson, who I think that he obviously he could have lived up to expectations.
He was close, by the way. He actually he had a really long catch that was I think it was down at like the 1 or within the red zone, and then it got overturned.
Yeah. But so like Jordan Whittington is someone that like when you look at situations like this, like that's why we found out about Puka, is because like opportunity like that with Cooper Kupp being gone most of the off season, and early season. So like I don't blame people for getting interested in Jordan Whittington. Obviously, we learned that when you're out without Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, they're just gonna run the ball. But if anyone, like I'd be more interested in Colby Parkinson, who I started in a few leagues, started in Scott Fishbowl, drafted him over Jordan Whittington. But I don't blame people for getting hyped about that at all.
Yeah, and just to round it out, Mike Evans, like you said, caught that Pat Surtain coverage. Brandon Cooks, Calvin Ridley. I mean, this is just going to happen. It's Will Levis. Some weeks Calvin Ridley's going to hit. Some weeks he's not. You're just going to have him in your lineup every week and hope. Or trade him, which is
trade him.
We trade him off a good game, to be honest. Jamo Williams and Rashid Shaheed with the Goose. That one hurt a lot of people.
In my work league.
That one felt personal.
In my work league, it's a smaller league, but it's my highest paid. And my wide receivers have been doing terrible this year. I got plenty of great running backs, let me tell you. I got Breece Hall in the second overall. Jahmyr Gibbs fell back to me, so that's my running back combo. I picked Pacheco, who went down, but I also drafted Alvin Kamara later on in that draft. So that's like my flex spot. That's my running back core, and it's been carrying me. But man, my wide receivers have been terrible, and Ayuk's hasn't come through. Cooper Kupp went down. T. Higgins I have in that one, but I picked up Rashid Shaheed via waivers, and that was the first waiver I used because you only get 25 in that league throughout the whole season. Picked up a Shaheed, started him right before the game. I'm like, all right, if any game, because I now moved Cup and Pacheco to IR. I have 2 spots available. I'm like, okay, one of them went to Shaheed. I still have a spot available. If any week is the week that Roma Dunze goes off, it's this week, and he was available still in that league. So I'm like, I'm gonna pick him up. Because if I wait and he goes off, there's no way I'm gonna get him off the waivers. So I picked him up. Sure enough, started Shaheed over Rome. Rome gets 20. Shaheed gets a goose egg. But at least I have the rights to Roma Dunze the rest of the season. So I also have Terry in that league, and I'm really worried about Scary Terry at this point.
Oh, yeah, that's another one that, to me, is a nuclear option. I've been actively trying to pair him with anything I can to get rid of him. We got a question before we move on to the grossest part of the farts. 0-3 with Jaden, Bijan. So Jaden Daniels, I'm assuming, Bijan Robinson, Brees Hall, Josh Jacobs, Singletary, Tyreek, I think AJ Brown, DK Metcalf, Amari Cooper, George Pickens, Dalton Kincaid. Do I make moves or ride? It's an 8-man league. So yeah, it looks like he made some trades. I mean, yeah, you just ride. Honestly, what I would be doing right now is, so one of my strategies just overall this year that's really been working, and it worked. This was obviously something that I was doing pre-draft, but now I've been trying to actively trade my way into it. A lot of the running backs that I feel like are good for the rest of the year. I mean, you already have them. Like you talk about Devin Singletary. That's one of my trade targets right now. David Montgomery would be another one. Kind of these like middle of the pack running backs that people like, but are still okay to trade away. Brian Robinson, another name out there.
Can I add this? Because it also resonates with the comment beforehand as well. It's so hard for the people that are like saying like, oh, I'm 0-3 and this is my team. Like, should I be worried? It's hard to say like, oh yeah, you should be worried because of your record, but a lot of times your record is because your player went down. Like your star, like you got Puka, you got CMC the first week, he wasn't available. So like you're showing why your team's like 0-3. It's not because you're not performing. You're probably starting them and they're not available. So like you're not getting the full game out of them and what they can do. So I'm not really worried. I think you guys are gonna be fine. Hopefully Tyreek can turn things around. You know, he's electric, so if he can spark anything, it's probably going to be him in that offense. Shane as well, but asking to do Skylar Thompson things is like that's tough. But I think you'll be fine.
Well, it goes back to what we were saying of, yeah, you never give up. You always keep playing because you hope that other casuals will stop playing or miss a start here and there and, you know, miss some injured players here and there later on in the season, and you get a couple cheap, easy wins, and all of a sudden you make the playoffs as the 6th seed and you run the table, and all of a sudden you're the champion. And you get to have a really cool story about how you got there.
Well, you got Dalton Kincaid, and Dalton Kincaid just scored a touchdown. Booyah, baby.
Nice. That's huge right now with the state of the tight ends. But yeah, that's where I was like saying, like, the only thing that I would suggest, and this is just across the board, excuse me, is like I was saying, those kind of middle of the pack running backs that are performing there, there's going to be steady Eddie all year. Like some of these inconsistent wide receivers that aren't going to get better, like a Terry McLaurin, I would be actively trying to pair them with whatever the fuck I can to move on to a B-Rob or a David Montgomery or even a Devin Singletary. You know, a lot of that kind of tier of wide receiver, even DJ Moore, honestly, like, you know, Caleb Williams, I think in the Shane Waldron Eberflus system is shot. Like what I saw was a lot of garbage time. I was shocked that he threw the ball as much as he did. I think it's because they can't run the ball. This offensive line sucks. I'm not really impressed with the way that they're running this team. I think the assets that they have are great, but they're going to waste this rookie season. And by next year, this whole coaching staff is going to get wiped out. We're going to have something completely new next year anyways. So that's what I'm predicting, and that's what I predicted before. Like the moment they said we're keeping Eberflus, I was like, cool. So he'll be gone next year. Then is what's going to happen, because you guys always do this, where you keep the coach you had 1 year longer than you should because you drafted a rookie quarterback, even though like you should just start new with everybody. But
I wrote about that in that article, so if you guys want to go ahead and check that out at clubfantasy.com. It's Keenan Allen review. I wrote about how I thought that the Bears offense was going to unfold, and Shane Waldron was just going to, with the expectations that the Bears fans put on Caleb Williams to hit 4,000 yards his rookie season, combined with Shane Waldron's offense and what we've seen out of him, it was a recipe for disaster since the initial signing. And I think that it's going to be something that, when I even wrote about that as well, it's like I thought that JJ McCarthy was going to be available, but it's still showing true, even with Sam Darnold, then, is that if they're starting to look up at the rest of the division, you got the Vikings. If you're close with the Vikings and you got the Packers and the Lions ahead of you, obviously the Vikings are number one. They're tied with the Seahawks for number one in the NFC right now. So they're the bottom of the NFC North looking up. At what point do they start panicking and realize, like, hey, we're going to finish last in the NFC North again, and we have 2 first-round picks this year. What's going on? They're going to try to do the same thing that the Bills did last year. They're going to point the finger at the offensive coordinator, hoping that they can turn things around so the head coach doesn't get fired by the end of the year. That's just like that's bad, toxic franchise 101. That's what it is.
I think Flus isn't safe either, though, in this situation, because
he'll be gone by week 10. I believe it. I really do.
They're gonna clean out everybody this year.
Week 10. I say week 10.
All right. Let's get into. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just saying week 10. I would be willing to bet that they at least fire Matt Eberflus by week 10, and then they end up firing.
The only reason I don't think they do that is because then Waldron would be the interim. You would assume, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Shane Waldron. Shane Waldron will be fired by week 10.
Oh, okay.
And Eberflus will be fired by the end of the year. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Yes, they replace Waldron in season, and then they replace Flus and just the entire coaching staff essentially like next year. That makes more sense.
Correct. Yes, I apologize. Yep.
No worries. All right, let's get into the tight ends. Elite tight end is dead.
Perfect reference right
Right.
there.
Oh my God, Sam Laporta, poor Sam Laporta. He wasn't even doing that great, anyways. But like, bro, name a tight end. Put them on this list. I just put Colby Parkinson because I had him as a streamer, and I still think he's more viable than people think. Hunter Henry had a bad game. Jonnu Smith, Chico Conco, Isaiah Likely, like Mark Andrews was somehow worse, but I thought this was the type of game where I thought Likely would show up again. Maybe not as big as week 1, but I was kind of thinking like, maybe like 5 for 50 or something like that. Nah, not even. So tight ends fucking suck.
I keep writing in I wrote the last 2 weeks the same blurb because I believe it reigns true, and obviously last week it didn't transpire, but I still think it's true. Is like, you don't know whether each week is going to be a Mark Andrews week or Isaiah Likely week. You know good and damn well that it's going to be a Zay Flowers week every week in that wide receiver room. And so like I'm a little worried about Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, like which one's going to be each game. But from what we saw out of John Harbaugh, John Harbaugh came out today and said that it's going to be a roller coaster for Mark Andrews managers this season. So does that give you any optimism? Absolutely not. So you have to almost imagine that Isaiah Likely's a start. When you were on the Mark Andrews Isaiah Likely trade block show that we were talking about it, and I'm like, I think I'm moving Mark Andrews all the way down to like my tight end 9, and Isaiah Likely is like my tight end 13, and that's how close they are in my rankings because I'm really actually worried about Mark Andrews and what he can do. And I think that I would almost start Isaiah Likely over Mark Andrews right now, just because I think that we're seeing Isaiah Likely be more of a factor.
So the way that I've been taking that advice with a grain of salt, the way that I've been employing that advice is when they are facing good defenses that I think are capable of getting to Lamar, that's where, when I looked at week 1 and the tape and the way that they used Isaiah Likely most often against the Chiefs, was a lot of these, because he's the second tight end, it's a lot of these little leak out routes where it's the dump off pass for Lamar. It's the safe outlet. Whereas Mark Andrews is doing more of like a 10-yard, whether he's doing a 10-yard out, in, or post, like his stuff is actually more in the medium range. And so, yeah, that's like a look downfield, but then, oh my God, someone's coming, dump it off to Isaiah Likely right here.
Yeah.
I thought that would happen more against the Cowboys, and it just didn't. But that's where it's like, I'm not just blindly playing Isaiah Likely as if he is just set it and forget it, but I am actively trying to stream him in matchups where I feel like the blitz will be heavier against Lamar.
I know what you are going to title this next video. Is Isaiah Likely the next Gabe Davis?
Oh, my fuck.
Because it's coming down to matchups
at
this point. And the matchups that he's favored in, man, that guy could be the tight end 1 each week. He's that good.
It only takes fucking 12 points to be tight end 1 at this point. So, I mean, what are we even talking about?
You're goddamn right. So,
all right. Before we move on to waivers and wrap up the show here, so we can go watch some football. We always got to toss up the defense. The Raiders. That was one where I had them very early in the week before it was announced that Bryce Young was going to be sitting. The Raiders, I had them as a streaming matchup. As soon as they put in Andy Dalton, I took them out of as many lineups as I could remember that they were in. I was like, bro, I'm to the point that I started the Rams in a couple over the Raiders because I was like, I just know the Raiders are going to get twos here. So the Raiders, but the one I thought was a smash, the one that I actually was like, this is the number 1 defense pickup of the week and should be a lock, stock, 2 smoke and barrel. They haven't been able to score a touchdown all fucking year. The Bucks. The Bucks, like I said, they did the Freaky Friday swap with Denver, and Denver was top in the top 5, and the Bucks were in the bottom. And then Titans, 49ers, and Chargers. Just if for some reason you tried streaming any of those, streaming the Titans against Malik Willis, streaming the Chargers against a bad Steelers offense because we can't score more than 20 points even when we look good, and the 49ers against the Rams who were beat the fuck up. None of those worked out. So let's just get into the waivers.
All righty.
The fuck is in the air. The fuck, there's white shit everywhere. The fuck, I must be fucking baked and this shit's probably fake. The fucking hell did I just take? The fuck?
Bro, this week 3 of waivers. What is going on, my guy? Andy Dalton, the number 1 quarterback waiver. If you didn't get him last week like I did, and I paid a lot for him last week. If you didn't get him last week, you're going to pay through the fucking nose this week. If you're in any kind of super flex and you're needing a quarterback, drop all your money on Andy Dalton because that was not a fluke what he did against the Raiders. It was actually pretty mid. He's capable of doing that pretty much week in, week out, running kind of a similar thing of what Sam Darnold's doing in Minnesota. But then Justin Fields, if he's lingering out there, Gardner Minshew, I've seen in a couple single quarterback leagues. And then shout out Malik Willis. If you're really hurting in a super flex, there's usually not any options in super flex leagues, but Malik Willis might actually still be there, and he's running the ball a lot. He's not, even when he's winning, he's not getting a ton with the passing game, but he's running like crazy. So
we're going to go really.
Let's see your quarterback waivers.
If we're going to go really deep, let's talk about how there's 3 names that are backup quarterbacks that we've seen now Sam Darnold show out. And I think that we could see names like Mac Jones, like maybe Mac Jones finds a trade partner somewhere throughout the year. Sam Howell, maybe it's time to roster Sam Howell. Maybe someone comes out of the woodwork and goes after Sam Howell. I believe also Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Like maybe he's the guy that ends up in Miami. I could see that. So maybe these are 3 names that that no one's really keeping their eye on. Aiden O'Connell's probably going to end up taking over for Gardner Minshew, so I'd probably avoid Gardner Minshew, picking him up. But these are names that no one's really looking at right now. You kind of want to be one step ahead. And if you're in a deep league, go out, try to find one of these 3 guys because there's probably a roster spot for him. Zach Wilson out there.
Jameis is the one that, for me, if I had the roster spot in a deep enough superflex, I'd be rostering Jameis Winston for sure.
I don't know. That's going to be a hard one. I could you see them doing a Russell Wilson, like, and actually like benching him at some point throughout the year to cut him? Like, it would come down, and I'm not a lawyer and I haven't looked at the case at all, so I can't speak heavily on this. But from what I've gathered recently is that there's a clause that if this recent allegation that he has against him is that if that wasn't spoken with the team prior, that he actually could be cut, and there'd be like a clause in his contract that it could be waived without them paying him the rest of the remainder.
I did see that too, but I was actually, just to be fair, I was talking about as a potential trade candidate, Jameis Winston, not necessarily taking over for the Browns, but just as someone who, like, I could see, the Browns trading him and keeping DTR because they know that they're stuck with Deshaun Watson, and I feel like because Jameis Winston is a competent enough and likable enough quarterback, I feel like there's a lot of background noise of like, hey, play Jameis Winston, and it's just as easy a way to get rid of that noise as starting Jameis over Deshaun is just trade Jameis.
What if Hendon Hooker gets a call?
Yeah, like that's what I mean. Like, there's a lot of
reunite with Jalen Hyatt in New York.
Well, Daniel Jones, I'm not gonna lie, he looked half decent last week. I mean, it's the nature of NFL quarterback, like that. It's very fluky. It feels like, and this year more than ever, I feel like I wrote an article about how I feel like the kickoff rules are affecting things too, because it's a lot of shortened fields, and I don't think people realize, like, shortened fields. It's not just that, like, obviously mathematically, like, the teams are getting less yards because they're starting from the 30 to 50 yard line on a lot of their drives that are coming off of kickoffs. Whereas, like, formerly those plays could have started anywhere between the 20 and the 0. It's also the fact of, I think people don't understand necessarily the mentality changes that has on the defense, where it's like they were already playing a lot of cover 2 high safety, which has been lamented by everyone from Mel Kiper to every fucking Twitter jokester on the face of the planet. But it's like, that's been actually, like, slowly coming back for years and years, because they realized, like, the only quarterback that was able to chew through that is, like, the Tom Brady's of the world, and all these kind of young quarterbacks coming into the league, like, they can't handle it. And also, like, you look at the way to slow down the Chiefs offense, it's like, yeah, you got to force Patrick Mahomes to be not Patrick Mahomes, make him play like Tom Brady, which he's capable of. That's why he's a go-to, but it's like, it's not as impressive for fantasy. So it's suppressing the fantasy potential for even someone as good as Patrick Mahomes, because you're forcing him into these game manager roles. And that's happening across the NFL. It's becoming more and more popularized. But this NFL kickoff rule this year is even making it worse, because not only now you're playing on short field, so the defense is right away thinking cover 2, because I'm not going to let them just throw a 50-yard bomb right into my fucking end zone. But also the kickers, bro. The kickers are kicking from 50, 60 yards out. So it's like, if I know I can just run the ball, play conservatively, at least get the field goal, but then maybe I play for the time. Like, that mentality of my kicker can kick it from 60 is almost making some of these coaches more conservative at the same time, on top of the fact that the defense is more conservative. So it's like, conservative means conservative. And now we're seeing more running plays, meaning less time for opportunities in general. And so we've seen, actually, like, I just did a prop where I took the under on 8 quarterbacks for passing attempts. And except for one, I took an over on Geno. And out of 7, 5 hit. I mean, like, yeah, I didn't hit my prop, but it's like 7 out of 7 quarterbacks that I picked to hit the under on pass attempts. So it's like,
you're on the right track.
But that's where I'm saying, like, if that's the case, then, like, yeah, it's fucking us up for fantasy. And that's why we've seen, I think, like, a very depressed scoring at the beginning of the year. And it's especially like, with all the touchbacks, because you don't want teams returning it to your 50, but you're still starting at the 30. So it's like, yeah, it's a whole fucking rigmarole.
Yeah, I think you broke it down perfectly, honestly. So,
all right, running back waivers. This is where it's going to get crucial. Chuba Hubbard, like I mentioned at the top, was dropped in a shit ton of leagues. He's going to be my number one priority. Speaking of like deeper leagues, Garendo and Tracy. Those are going to be my two priority handcuffs that I'm looking at. Tyrone Tracy already actively involved. Isaac Garendo got 5 carries. So if something, God forbid, happens to Jordan Mason, he's the next man up theoretically for San Fran. Alexander Madison, if you really want to get gross with it, he seems to be getting all the receiving work out of the backfield is the thing. That's why he's relevant. I think it wasn't just that he got the touchdown this week. I think he had 5 receptions. And then the other week he had the touchdown. He also had 4 receptions.
Jamar Chase, 1 touchdown.
Yes, let's go.
There's 1. 2 more. Let's see.
All right.
I think it's 3. I call it here, and I want that highlighted.
Yeah, no, I need that. I need that so bad in my DFS, like all my daily stuff that I did a shit ton of. I took a lot of Burrow, and I took a lot of Burrow Chase stacks and Burrow Higgins stacks. I think I'm the heaviest on Burrow specifically at quarterback, and my second ended up being a combination of just flip-flopping between Jaden Daniels and Trevor Lawrence because I was punting quarterback. I think I only have like 1 share of Josh Allen, so that's the one I'm hoping it's a James Cook game because I took a lot of James Cook.
Ooh,
that's my guy this year. If
there's
the only running back I've drafted more than Saquon Barkley this year was James Cook.
And you were awarded last week, that's for sure.
Saquon hit this week too, so hopefully. But yeah. Did you have any running back waivers to hit us with before we get to wide receivers?
The name that's calling out to me right now is Roschon Johnson. I thought that DeAndre Swift was going to be like the guy starting out the year in Shane Waldron's offense, like we saw with Kenneth Walker. But I think that there's plenty of opportunity for Roschon Johnson to emerge. What did he have? Like 3 touches this last week or so?
Yeah. Oh, Emmanuel Wilson was the other one we mentioned at the top earlier.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs still dealing with back issues and just getting like crazy workload. So if ever he misses a game or something, as long as Marshawn Lloyd is still irrelevant, like Emmanuel Wilson looked good to me. So I would have him stashed in deeper leagues.
I picked up Emmanuel Wilson like a few weeks ago. Actually, I was prepared. I posted the trolls meme of Branch being down in the hole and being like, "Who's crazy now? Me, crazy prepared." Because I had so many shares of Emmanuel Wilson. Because as soon as Marshawn Lloyd went to IR, I was like, "All right, this is going to be Emmanuel Wilson, undrafted free agent." So I was on that beforehand. I think that he could perform pretty well, but I think that we saw his ceiling so far.
Before we move to wide receiver, we got a spicy trade question. Are we trading CMC for A-Shane straight up?
No.
I would. In redraft, to be clear. Assuming this is a redraft, not dynasty. Actually, even in dynasty, I think I would just do it. I think A-Shane, at this point in his career, the way Mike McDaniels is using him, he's using him pretty much like CMC. I know he's not at the same level as CMC, but he's also like way younger. I think as much as I love CMC, he's definitely getting closer to the end of his career.
Would you trade Saquon for Etienne?
No.
It's the equivalent for me.
It's close. Yeah, I get that. But so again, I talked about Saquon a lot going into the season I knew Saquon was going to hit, not even necessarily because of how he is as a running back, but because of how he is as a teammate, how he is as a human being and as a player, his mental acumen for the game. I think people forget that coming out of college and when he was drafted, people talked about Saquon saying like, if this guy was a quarterback, he'd be the number 1 overall with a bullet. Wouldn't even be fucking close because of his love of the game, his personality, and his way that he affects teammates. His teammates are willing to run through the wall for him. And if you go back to week 1 and watch the post-game interview on field with AJ Brown and Saquon, AJ Brown looked giddy as a fucking schoolgirl talking about the offense and Saquon and how good everything. Again, it's everyone rooting for Saquon internally on that team. Like, those are all the factors of like, and also he is an amazing athlete and excellent running back in the offense. But like, all of those other things are there too. But like, I think people overlooked the intangibles.
Do the 49ers talk about CMC like that?
Yeah, and
and do the Dolphins players talk about Achane like that?
Actually, CMC, to a degree, but
they do.
I think they do, but I also think they recognize that it's Shanahan first.
I don't think so.
I think it is. I think with the Niners, Shanahan really is like, it is Shanahan is the 1A, and CMC, they recognize that CMC is so good that when you put him in Shanahan's system, it's like almost unstoppable. But again, it's still the fact that Jordan Mason is now doing so well that's why it still always comes out. Sirianni doesn't have that weight behind him. No one's looking at Nick Sirianni, being like, he's the mastermind behind this offense that's making Saquon so good.
Question: If you switch both of them, who do you think would be better? Like, if CMC was on the Dolphins and Achane was on the 49ers, who do you think would be better?
Right now, Achane.
Do you really believe that?
Well, I only say that because I'm looking at the rest of the Dolphins team, and especially right now without Tua.
It's the same. It's the same offense. It's the same. It's the same offense. Who's the better player?
This is why I said in redraft, I'm only looking at it from the perspective of you're banking on CMC's injury and Tua's injury, and I'm looking at it of like, okay, well, even though Tua is injured, Achane is still active. Mostert still seems to be inactive. Achane is very clearly getting all of the workhorse work. Maybe if they can get someone who's even slightly more competent than Skylar Thompson, like, I'm getting the extra 6 weeks potentially out of Achane. And if, God forbid, CMC like decides, oh, I'm not coming back until the playoffs, like, you know, the actual playoffs, then we're all fucked, right? So it's like you get out of that potential risk. Like, again, in redraft, I could see it. I could see it.
If I put this into wide receiver terms, last season, this is someone asking me, would you trade Cooper Kupp for Rashee Rice? Or honestly, probably Rashee Rice. That's probably the best analogy I would put. And so even then, like, Cooper Kupp's upside, like, sure, could, like, what we've seen out of Rashee Rice, like, the rest of that season, like, he was still great and consistently, but like Cooper Kupp, when he's available, he is a week winner each week that he's out there. So I would have to go with CMC still.
Well, the thing is, I also view Achane as a potential league winner because he's so explosive. It's like,
I'm not going to deny
that. And then my thing is like, so I guess what percentage would you say that CMC doesn't come back for the fantasy season?
0.
I say 20%. I think it's higher than. I think it's 20% that he doesn't come back at all for our fantasy playoffs.
I think he'll be back for the playoffs, 100%.
He'll be back for the real playoffs for sure, 100%. And maybe even like he might be back for championship week. So it's like, if I told you could have Achane for the rest of the season, presuming that he stays healthy now, because again, injury could happen to anyone. But like, let's just assume in this contextual world that Achane stayed healthy and CMC was only going to come back for championship week, and you knew that somehow. You looked into the crystal ball and you saw it. You know that you're going to have to deal with lower production until, like, let's say Tua came back week 10. But you're still getting production. You're still getting, like, at least 10-ish fantasy points. Sometimes a couple little spiky, you know, he got a long touchdown here and there kind of thing. But, like, you're getting production, and then Tua eventually comes back. And it's like, but on the CMC side, you get championship week only. Full CMC, like fully.
You put it like that, obviously you have to go with Achan, but I think that CMC will be back earlier than that.
Yeah. Well, that's the bet that you're making. That's where I'm like, I think that's the true bet that you're making.
I would take that bet.
Trade. All right, let's crush through these and go watch some football. We're really dragging along here, but that's okay. I love you, Hoove. Wide receivers, Adam Thielen, if he clears injury protocols and was dropped in leagues, 100% needs to be owned. Dude caught an amazing touchdown. And if he didn't get folded on, he definitely would have had a better game, to the point that I think him and Deontay Johnson could balance a little bit. But I think they're both very relevant now. And all the rest of the guys are ancillary. Jacoby Myers, I would keep an eye on if he gets dropped anywhere. If you're in shallower leagues, Jalen Miller should be owned. Trey Tucker should be added. This is, again, assuming I think Devontae could find his way. He seems unhappy. Even if he wasn't the one making business decisions, he seems generally unhappy. When they all went in at halftime, dude was on the bench looking like, what the fuck am I doing here? So, like, I could still see that happening. I would just maybe stash those guys in deeper leagues. Tutu Atwell, I think, is a startable flex player. He's one that I would be really targeting if he's still floating out there. And Alan Lazard, I think, as much as people wanted to joke about it, act like it wasn't a thing, like, bro, Aaron Rodgers is going to make it a thing.
Hassan Reddick for Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I would love that. Garrett Wilson truthers will hate it, but I would be fine with it.
That'd be crazy.
For tight, did you have anything for wide receivers? Sorry, before we go to tight ends. Nah?
No, I think that you got most of them.
Tight ends: Cole Kmet, Tyler Conklin, and this one is a deep cut. I'm sad to even have to say it, but Brock Wright. Brock Wright's been with the Detroit Lions for a hot minute. Basically, he was drafted there. He's always been the tight end too. He is serviceable in place of Sam Laporta. I am saying serviceable as in you should be expecting, as in like hoping for 6 to 8 fantasy points. And this is assuming you're tight end dealing with tight end injuries or whatever, and you couldn't get anyone better.
I'll throw out some. You got basically the whole Saints tight end room. Because Taysom Hill's injured now. You know that someone's going to step up. Juwan Johnson. It's probably the number one option. But like we saw week 1, you saw him and Foster Moreau both put up numbers, which gives me, as someone that's incredibly excited about Dallin Holker in the long run, who knows, maybe he could be the true tight end one and get both of those opportunities for the long run with Juwan and Foster. But those guys are 2 guys you should keep your eyes on, even Dallin long term once he starts putting up something in that offense. Greg Dulcich, if he's not rostered yet, he's getting some targets, but he's not living completely up to the hype. Who else are some good ones? Saints. No.
Good ones is stretching it, isn't it?
Okay ones. I would say that. That's probably the best that you're gonna get.
You know what? Go out there, you people, and get a little Strange. All right. If Brenton Strange is still hanging.
Hey,
up.
Jatavian Sanders. Let's talk about Jatavian Sanders. Now that Adam Thielen is banged up, it's going to be either Xavier Legette stepping up or even Jatavian Sanders. Tommy Tremble. He outproduced Jatavian Sanders last week, but I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to happen for the long run. I mean, you saw what Dalton Schultz was able to do with Andy Dalton back in Dallas a few seasons ago. Taysom Hill had one of his best seasons with Andy Dalton down in New Orleans, but obviously Taysom Hill is Taysom Hill, so it's hard to compare that and say it was Andy Dalton being a part of that offense. But, I mean, there's a pathway for Jatavian Sanders to be fantasy valuable. Is he going to be a startable asset? I don't know, but I could see him making his way to the waiver wire and being a candidate. So maybe being earlier on Jatavian Sanders than others, it would be something I'd invest in.
I like him as a deep stash, and again, deeper leagues like in Scott Fishbowl, for example,
sure,
with light end premium. I would love making that ad, especially because again, Andy Dalton is like a rising tide for all the ships there. So it's like, if you had said this to me when I was Bryce Young, and I wanted to believe in it pre-draft, and as soon as I saw it in the regular season, I was like, oh, this is fucking dead in the water. But like, yeah, no, I had Sanders as my tight end too pre-draft. I like him as a Ben Watson comp. And the only way he develops is if Andy Dalton stays quarterback. So I don't hate that as like a deep stash right now.
Yep.
All right. For defense also, just I always throw out some defensive streaming waivers. Miami Dolphins, as much as they're struggling at quarterback, they can get the Will Levis-led Titans this week. So, Will Levis, good for at least one boneheaded mistake a week. Indianapolis Colts against my Pittsburgh Steelers. As much as I like what the Steelers are doing from a real-life football perspective, they almost never put more than 20 points on the board, so it feels like a safe bet for at least 10 points. And, bro, the Vikings, I even though it's in Green Bay, the Vikings with Brian Flores look fucking for real. I think they can turn Malik Willis potentially back into a pumpkin and stuff this run defense, or this run game for the Packers. If that happens, like, Packers going to be getting an upset here in Green Bay, I think.
I can see that.
All right. Any defensive streamers before we jump out, Hoof?
No, I think you knocked it out of the park, my guy.
Beauty. Speaking of getting out of the park, let's get the fuck out of here so we can watch football. Again, amazing that anyone is even still watching this. I appreciate every single solitary one of you. Super kick that subscribe and like button. Make sure that you guys are following my guy Hoove on Twitter, checking out all his work that he's doing with Optimus Fantasy and otherwise. What's the show that you're doing with Dustin? I'm blanking on the name of the show there.
Trade Block. So make sure you guys go ahead and go over to Club Fantasy on Tuesday nights, 7 o'clock Central Standard Time. So
there you go. Tomorrow night,
8 o'clock Central Standard Time.
Oh, yeah. Tomorrow at 8 Central, so that's 9 my time. So tomorrow at 9 Eastern, right?
8 Eastern. So 7
8
Central.
Eastern. Fuck.
Sorry, I'll show up. You guys will see the link. Come to my page. Make sure you guys follow. It'll post it tomorrow. I'm the worst co-host, I promise. But it's okay. We'll have a great show tomorrow. Make sure you guys come check it out. Where we break down all the dynasty values. I believe it's a Terry McLaurin episode. So we got a great one in for you tomorrow.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Hoof. I will say that I am officially cheered up. So until the next time, you guys, I'll catch all of you on the flip side.
He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes